This time on Meet Your Heroes, in association with Hagerty, we meet the Honda that changed the brand forever. It was the car that featured development input from none other than the late great Ayrton Senna and set new handling and user benchmarks for the whole supercar sector.
Good morning.
Hello, John T.
I should never have told you that story.
That's his nickname from school.
It's not my nickname from school.
It's what your dear late mother used to call you.
She did, bless her cotton sons.
So if everyone could just put I love John T in the comments, that would be great. Welcome to another video, by the way. But where are you taking me today, Johnny?
We are going back to appreciating classics, to see our good friend Rich, and to look at one of the most iconic sports cars ever made. Sorry, supercar, the Honda NSX.
Because you can't talk about this car without talking about Ayrton Senna, can you? That's the thing, you can't mention NSX because the magic of the great man at the time obviously was driving a McLaren with a Honda engine, and obviously some genius in the marketing department thought, right, get him involved with a sign off on this and let's just do a video of him. And then rang him up and said, Ayrton, what are you doing tomorrow? Nothing.
Do you think this is how it went?
This is how it went. The marketing guy rang, Ayrton, what are you doing tomorrow? Nothing, mate. I'm just hanging out. Can you come to the track? I haven't got any race gear with me. I've only got my loafers. Doesn't matter.
And like white jeans and a shirt like unbuttoned down to here.
Doesn't matter. Just come anyway. Just obviously been to Burton's the day before, clearly, in this video. So he had nothing to do. He'd obviously shopped for the week. He was bang on trend.
Just casually getting into the car, ripping it out the pits and doing his heel and toe and just...
But that's pure talent. It makes me laugh at all the people that go out and buy those Pilotti shoes.
Going,
I need to buy Pilottis because to be a great driver, I must have the correct footwear. And there's Ayrton Senna in his $24.99 Burton slip-ons.
Anyway.
Back to the NSX. Don't you think Honda were brave in doing this? Because to me, this is... I love it when manufacturers take a huge leap. So to me, I've got a Subaru SVX because I can't afford an NSX. And I loved when Subaru did the SVX because they were a manufacturer of basically farmers' vehicles, weren't they?
Yeah.
They'd done a few nice bits like the L Series. And then you know what we're going to do? We're going to go and get Giugiaro to design a space-age coupe with glass canopy windows.
Yeah, the windows are crazy.
They are really crazy. Yeah. And then we'll make it. It's nothing that we've ever done before. And we'll do a 3.3 flat six and we'll go head-to-head with Porsche 944s. And they did it. And it's suddenly, the brand just jumps. But with the NSX, it's even further, isn't it? So the manufacturer that's making Honda Civics and cars that your nan can go to the shops in suddenly decides to make a genuine supercar, a genuine mid-engine supercar. I just think that takes a huge amount of bravery. And also to commit to do it and to do it so well. That's the amazing part of this story for me.
Sounds a bit backward saying it. The Honda NSX is such a famous and successful sports car or supercar, yet it wasn't in other ways because they just didn't sell.
No. Which sort of belies the technical brilliance of the car, doesn't it, really? Because the car was good enough to sell in huge numbers and, bizarrely, was so easy to use and so easy to drive. But I think it lacked at the beginning, not now, but at the beginning when people were selling that car in showrooms, doesn't have the badge cachet, does it?
No.
If you say to your successful city brokers firm, I've just bought my new supercar, what have you got, Wayne?
I've got a Honda.
I've got a Honda. What? You didn't buy the Ferrari or the Lamborghini? It's like, is your bonus really that good this year?
This is how I'd say it. I think anybody who had bought an NSX over these cars in that period, I think they were ahead of the curve, and I think they were proper drivers, and they weren't bothered by badge snobbery. They were buying the car based on its ability on track and on road. I think that's something that you've kind of got to doff your cap to those people and go, do you know what? You knew what you were on with.
Yeah.
And I think with Honda being in F1, Ayrton Senna, yeah, there's a certain amount, but you can have a great driver in a bad car and it won't perform.
Yeah.
But you had the best driver in the best supercar.
With the best shoes.
With the best shoes.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Let's go.
Let's go.
What a beauty, and it's quite a low beauty as well, isn't it?
It is really low. I think I look tall against this.
Even you look tall against this car. But I tell you what, for a car that is now, 32 years old, Hasn't it aged beautifully?
They've never looked. I never thought they looked dated. I think if anything looked a bit dated, it was probably the rear end of the car. They are a thing of beauty. They have come of age. You look at that now, and it is a really long overhand.
Did you prefer the version 1 or the version 2 cars, though?
I always liked the first gen,
Yeah.
and I wasn't fond of the second gen. But once again, over the years, I like both. I would have both. Definitely.
I would prefer Phase 1 just because you get pop-up
Because you
headlights.
get the pop-up headlights.
Everything
but then
with
again,
pop-up
stuff
headlights.
you get in the later ones, you get like the Type R's, and they were cool. Because they did the white ones with the white wheels with the red Honda logos. But I don't think there is a bad one, is there?
There isn't. I'd have any of them. I'd even have an auto. That's how much I like this car.
Can you convert an auto to a manual?
I bet you could. There's probably clever people out there. But I guess the value in all these cars now is the originality, isn't it?
We'll go into it in great detail, but this is an 11,000 mile UK manual car, which is
probably the best one in the country. Again, like all the cars that Appreciating Classics, beautifully prepared, flawlessly prepared, in fact. All the money, but find a better one.
Yeah.
I think that's all the cars you see here. They're all at the very top end of the retail tree, but they're all faultless. And you get to a point in your life, don't you? I'm not there yet, but you get to a point in your life where you just want the best. And then I think these are those kind of cars. And this one is, I just cannot fault this car. It is like new. The paintwork, the upholstery, the dashboard, every element of this car. It's just been ice blasted as well. It's just perfect.
Yeah. They have a workshop here as well. So Rich has, so they have the car sales, but then they have the underside restoration and all that in their workshops where they just make cars meticulous underneath. And one of the things they recently invested in was that ice blasting machine, which just gets rid of everything.
Very cool.
But it's less intrusive as, say, like a traditional shop blasting.
Or brushing.
Yeah, or brushing, yeah. So this just takes it off and it's away. So it's very much original and...
It's the future. It's a very nice car. And it's a great one to talk about today. So when the car came out, a lot of people, of course, were involved. The most famous of which, Mr. Ayrton Senna.
Yeah, I think if anybody's ever done any research or seen car videos over the years, you will have seen there's such a cool clip of Ayrton
with
where
his loafers.
he gets in with his loafers and then he just rips the back out of an NSX around the circuit, just so casually, you know, no race boots or gloves. He's just in as like he's just going to go sit and have a glass of wine and a smoke after.
Because I think we should say, shouldn't we really, in terms of performance, these aren't that fast. They're not fast. They're not blisteringly fast, are they? But what they do have is an incredible balance, very lightweight, lovely feel, and just the package, isn't it? It's very Japanese. We're going to drive this car later in the video, but I think it's fair to say, even though this car has just wonderful balance, incredible poise, it feels much lighter and more usable than most supercars. It's not that fast.
No, it's not, and I don't think we'll find that out when we drive it because we're going to take so much utmost respect for the car, aren't we? It's, for me, I've got a lot of history with these cars. It's something, a car that I've always loved, a car that I used in Gran Turismo, but when we were growing up, one of my friends, Brad, we had a house party around his, and he took us into the garage to show us his quad and stuff, and I was just like, holy, your dad's got an NSX, and his dad had same as this UK car, which is just, it was so rare.
Yeah.
And I think most of the lads just beeline past a Honda and didn't know what it was.
But this is the thing, and we spoke about this in the car, didn't we? For a badge on a supercar, you don't expect a Honda, do you? It's a very brave thing for them to do. It's to reposition themselves in the market. It's like when Ford did the GT40. You're taking a workaday brand and you're making it exotic and aspirational.
So at that time, you had Honda. They were doing F1, yes, admittedly, they were at the highest end, but then they had Civics at the other end. So then you almost had like a void in between. During this era, so late 80s, you had Ferrari 328s. So they were up against cars like that. And Honda went and said that had to be an all-aluminium monocoque chassis.
Which was the first.
And this was the first mass-produced car that was to do that.
And do you prefer a monocoque to, say, a duocoque?
Yeah.
But what Honda did, and what the Japanese are brilliant at doing, is they took something that everybody wants. Everybody likes the idea of a supercar, don't they?
Yeah.
But actually, most people, particularly supercars of the late 80s, heavy clutches, relatively unreliable, not so easy to drive, not cheap and easy to service. And what I love about the design philosophy of this car was, you know what, we'll take all of the things you like about a supercar, wonderful height, amazing looks, incredible handling, sparkling performance, but we'll just make it easy to use, we'll make it easy to drive, we'll make it relatively cheap to service. Yeah. And that's what the NSX was, wasn't it?
Yeah, because when you think, and it very much is a supercar, and that's what people may just go, well, it's a Honda, it is a supercar.
But also, this particular example with 11,000 miles is probably about 50 grand more than many contemporary Ferraris, many contemporary Porsches.
Easy. Because they weren't exactly a big seller, were they?
No, that's the thing. I mean, what's hilarious, if you actually look through the sales figures, some years, even in huge markets like American Canada, they sold like 11 in a year. That's it, across the whole country, they're doing one a month in the entire country.
I dread to think of the value of, like as we just touched on earlier, the Gen 2 Type R, stuff like that. I bet they will be staggering money.
But I can remember when these were between 15 and 20 grand for a pretty reasonable JDM car. 15 or 20,000. This car now as a UK is 145.
Yeah.
Just goes to show how the market has matured and how quickly it's matured as well. But also this car has some serious creds. Gordan Murray reckons this is one of his touchstone cars. He references this in some of his designs. He thought the chassis was so good that they should put a bigger engine into it. It didn't. But he reckons because they didn't, this was his inspiration for the McLaren F1.
But bearing in mind, the initial, Honda had a 2-litre V6,
yeah,
and they were like, actually, that's not big enough. It's not enough power. So then they made the 3-litre V6. So supercar-wise as well, think of a 328, going back to that ethos. So same era, so spacious cockpit. This is loads more spacious than a 328. It's far better car than a 328.
Yeah.
But mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, and that's why it has got such a booty on it. But one of the things as well that Honda stipulated was they wanted 360 visibility for the driver, so no kind of blind spots.
Because the glass house on this car, it has a huge glass house, doesn't it? You really don't get the blind spots you normally get on the B-pillars.
One of the things they actually based it on was the F-16 fighter jet.
I think that is a bit of a stretch.
What?
Because it doesn't look that much like an F-16. In the concept drawing,
yeah. That was one of the things they...
But you could say though, couldn't you? Like, I think that's very marketing. You could say it's based on Menand's conservatory, because that's got an incredible... It's got a couple of wicker chairs in it. It's brilliant. It's got amazing 360-degree vision in that. It doesn't look like an F-16 though, does it?
That's actually in the spiel as well.
I know, but that's what it is. It's spiel. I write marketing copy for car makers all over the world.
Do you?
Yes. And that's the kind of thing
kind of a big deal.
That's the kind of thing you put in. You go, well, it's got a lot of glass. I used to work for Saab, didn't I? Saab used to bang on and on and on about the link with their aircraft technology. There was nothing in any of the Saab cars apart from black panel.
Black panel. I was about to say the black panel, surely, for night
which was the only thing that was basically it.
It was just your speedo. Everything else went off.
Yeah, because in the initial points of Saab's heritage, yes, the cars were made like aircraft. They were made like a wing section. They were made in an aircraft hangar by aircraft people using aircraft materials, even painted in aircraft paint, because that's all they had left. But that's the very first car. Fast forward to 2000, they weren't, but they were still using it.
Heritage.
It's heritage, but it's not necessarily true. That's what I'm saying.
Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Mini, quintessentially British.
But Mini isn't even a Mini anymore, is it? A Mini's massive. A Mini's basically a Maxi now, isn't it?
What, an Austin Maxi?
Yeah, it's huge. Absolutely.
I bet it's bigger. I bet a Clubman's bigger than a Maxi.
Did you not see that man that got with a new Mini Clubman? He built a cardboard original 10-foot Mini, and you can actually fit a 10-foot Mini in the interior of a Clubman. Gordan Murray had one. Gordan Murray did 75,000 miles in an NSX. So he must have daily driven that.
Gordan Murray's got quite a bit of a collection himself, hasn't he?
But he referenced this car in loads of his interviews, loads of his work. He uses this as like a benchmark when he's trying to do handling, ergonomics, layout, weight, material. He keeps referencing this car. So if you can build a car that impresses Gordan Murray, the maestro of chassis design, the maestro of minimalism and lightweight, it's got to be a good car.
See, one of the things I love about the NSX interior is that almost the dash where it just comes down and everything's just there. So as you talk about the ergonomics, it's just very just there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything. It's such a great era. It's like we've just
that addresses what the Italians never did do. Italian ergonomics on all of the supercars.
Bippity boopity. Like fans down here.
You have some heater switches here. Oh yeah, and then there's your demister over there.
Yes, honestly, the first time I got into like an 80s Ferrari, I think it was either a Testarossa or a 308, and I was like, where is everything?
Nothing's logical.
And I was looking on the dash, and I hadn't looked in the centre down here. We also did a video on the 328, which we'll put a link in above there now, up there somewhere. There? What? I don't know. Somewhere. But
because these were showroom contemporaries, weren't they? A very late 328 and an early NSX were head-to-head in the showroom.
Yeah, they were. But the 328s, I mean, they were just mass-produced. They outsold these. And in terms of values, where were they?
But also then, I mean, it's great because it's changed now, but then if you're in the pub and you put your two keyrings down, one of you's got a Ferrari keyring, one of you's got a Honda keyring, in the 80s and early 90s, when it was all about impressing people, you know, if you didn't know your cars, Honda's not as impressive, is it?
No, it isn't. But for those people who did buy one and keep hold of it, they had a bit of an insight.
I think it's a more intelligent choice. Yeah. The shape was very enduring because the shape basically came out in 1990, and although it was facelifted, wasn't it, 2002?
Yeah, around that time, yeah.
So they lost the pop-up headlights, a few very subtle tweaks. They didn't really change it that much. So that's 15 years of a model looking brilliant. Not many supercars last that long with so few tweaks.
So we're talking about successful, like 15 years was a long time, but they didn't sell a lot of them.
They didn't.
So I can't understand why they would run the car for so long.
Well, it's a halo product though, isn't it? A lot of manufacturers do it. It's a bit like the GR Yaris now. Toyota aren't making any money from any of those car sales, but having it in the range makes us all think very differently about Toyota. And this must have done so much good for the Honda brand. People that would never have considered a Honda before, even if they didn't buy an NSX, must have gone.
So from 1990 to 2005, there were a few changes. So was it not around 97? I think they saw the introduction of the 3.2 litre.
A little bit more torque, tiny bit more horsepower.
Yeah, but then 1995.
But you also got the F-Matic.
Yeah.
But why would you do this car? Well, it's probably America is the answer, isn't it? But why would you do a car this pure, this brilliant, that Gordan Murray thinks is one of the best cars ever made, put an automatic gearbox?
Yeah, a 4-speed auto. And I bet it would have had the gear, I'm sure we'll find something somewhere, but it would have had that gear selector out of like an Accord or a Civic.
Yeah.
It would have just been...
That'll do.
Yeah. Because a lot of the switch gear in here at the time was when Rover was working closely alongside Honda. So all the, like the door switches, you know, the window switches and stuff, it's the same as what was in a Rover 600. and it's not a parts bin special, this isn't. Far from it.
Well, a lot of supercars do have stuff out of much more mundane stuff. Like the Paganis, I always remember, had the Rover 200 heating control in the middle, isn't it?
Yes, it did. Yeah, that's some good knowledge.
Yeah, and every TVR has...
Yeah, the climate control.
Yeah. And every TVR has tail lights off something unusual. They've all got CX door mirrors, haven't they?
So TVR S2 had, was it Escort Mark III rear lights. Then the Griffith had Cavalier upside down rear lights.
One of them had Fiesta backlights, didn't it? My favourite though is the Invicta. When Invicta brought back that V8 thing, they had Passat lights on their sides, which is my favourite rubbish supercar thief. And every car in the world, including the McLaren F1, had either Citroen CX mirrors or Volkswagen Corrado mirrors. Yes,
another good one, Aston Martin DB7 had Mazda 323F rear lights.
Yes, it did.
And the Venturi Atlantique had BMW E21 rear lights.
Anyway, that's today's nerdy section. But you could argue that actually everything on the Honda, apart from a bit of switchgear, all the lights, everything, was pure. And to know that they'd never sell that many, to actually tool up for all of that stuff and not just nick it off a lower model, actually takes some deep pockets.
We've discussed values a little bit, and with your Hagerty buyer's guide, I'm sure you'll go into it, but Type R's, from 2003,
that's right,
and they were
JDM only.
JDM only. They start with a number 2 now, and that's they're 6-figure cars, and they're only going one way because A, they're getting nearer to that 25-year-old rule for America, but because all the JDM stuff, classic JDM, and the lower the numbers. So talking about low numbers, the values of these.
We should just explain that, just in case you don't know. It's the 25-year rule in America. Loads of cars that weren't previously eligible to be imported into America suddenly are, and it's causing a global spike in prices. So things like GTRs, things like certain Subarus, things like the NSX, even though they had the car domestically there, certain models that they couldn't get, they can suddenly bring in legally and properly and paper them and actually use them rather than just show them and display them. And the prices have gone crazy.
Oh, mental, absolutely mental. Look at R34 GTRs where they were definitely below 100, then even as like 2020, they could start with a 1.
Yeah.
Now they're all 2s. If you got a real rare one or a super clean GTR, they're just mental. But so yeah, the values of these have gone crazy. So let's go back to 1991. I wasn't quite raving, but I was listening to rave music.
Yeah.
So this car, brand new in the showroom, 55,000 sterling GBP.
Yeah. But they couldn't sell them, could they?
No, they couldn't.
Do you know how many cars they sold in the UK for the whole run?
How many?
450.
But didn't they reduce, so when the facelift came out 2002, 2003, didn't they reduce the price?
Yeah. They took £10,000 off.
Yeah.
And like the video we're talking about with the Lotus Sunbeam that we filmed here, do check that one out. There's some links in the bio below. These cars the halo cars, when they get to a point in their life, they can't sell them and they discount them.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous because it's the cars that end up being worth the most ridiculous amounts of money 20, 30 years down the line. At some point in their lifespan, when they're brand new, you can buy them off the showroom floor for pennies.
But the price reduction from 55 down to, say, 45,
yeah,
it did work.
It did. Because I think they doubled from about 10 to 20.
I mean, it is just mind-boggling to think that they continued to keep this on their shelves for sale.
Yeah.
And they sold 10 cars, and then they upped it by reducing it by 10 grand to 20-something cars.
But also the Japanese law stipulates that you have to create a parts provision for those cars for a certain number of years after you finish selling them as well. So there's the cost involved in keeping that inventory, keeping that production going. You can't just stop selling the car, you've got to then support it for a minimum number of years afterwards.
Yeah.
And they did that too.
But the good thing about these is because they were all aluminium, you're not susceptible to the rot and rust.
We should talk about values, Johnny, and I've got my phone out. I'm on the Hagerty price guide. I'm having a look. So this is the thing now. So I can remember when pretty decent cars were 15, 20 grand. Condition 4, which is the bottom of the pile, entry level now, bottom rung of the ladder, 30 grand.
That's insane.
I know, that's the ones that need love and a lot of love. So condition 3, well, obviously you still need to do quite a bit, but they're a bit tidier. Kind of 47.9, they're saying now. Condition 2, you're up to 56.6, and condition 1, so a car with normal mileage. I mean, this is an exceptional car. This car just hasn't been used. This is a museum quality car, which has to be in a category of its own. But condition 1 cars are 80 grand and up, basically. So even a car with sensible miles on is going to be the thick end of 100 grand. And obviously something like this, which is a once in a lifetime buy, you can go 145.
Yeah, so that and you need price guides. You need them to work to. But then, as you say, when you get to something like this,
it all goes out the window.
They're a guide.
Yeah.
And a guide is purely a guide. It's not gospel.
Yeah.
And something like this, you have to just go, well, it's... And look at the Type Rs. Look at them starting with a 2.
Yeah.
These aren't going down.
They're not.
They're just... None of the stuff here is going down in value. There's a bit of a clue in the name, Appreciating Classics.
Yeah.
So.
Does what it says on the tin, doesn't it, really? It's a very clever name. Very clever name. But technically, the car to me has always been very interesting because it isn't quite the way that other supercars were built. And I think Honda, because they couldn't fight with the badge, they fought with engineering. So I say we've started.
But they definitely won with that because, as I say, if you got a 328, if you were to, I know we keep referring to it because that's was one of its main rivals. But if you put these two cars back to back and you just kept driving lap after lap after lap,
yeah,
this thing would just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it.
It drives like a Civic, doesn't it? That's the thing. This is your nan could jump in this car and do a hot lap in it because it's just so easy to drive.
I don't know about a hot lap. She could definitely drive there.
She could do a hot lap down to the bingo and back.
I love these modified as well. I mean, I'm really...
Well, Al Clark, do check him out on
Al Clark, yeah.
Al Clark has got one of the coolest ones in red. He's done some really nice stuff on his, hasn't he?
Yeah.
T37s, ride height, body kit, con bonnet, just so many cool things. But the engine is a bit of a tour de force. And we should go through, I think, in detail some of the amazing parts of this car. It's a very interesting car technically. You've got two quad-cam 24-valve V6s available. The original one is 3 litre, that's 252 brake horsepower with 209 pound-feet of torque. But the 3.2 raises that to 276 brake horsepower and 224 pound-feet. And that came along in 1998. Honda reckon that the NSX was the recipient of a steady trickle of F1 technology. So you get things like titanium conrods, individual coils and platinum spark plugs. And they see their production debut on the NSX. So the suspension on the Honda is pretty traditional in its setup, but you do have an aluminium double wishbone coilover shock absorber. There's also alloy subframes, and it's all designed for speed and handling, and that's exactly what you want from a supercar. But they couldn't resist tinkering, and in 2002, the whole lot got fine-tuned. The front spring rates were changed, the rear anti-roll bar was stiffened, and they even widened the rear track by 10 millimeters. The main thing on the Honda, of course, what many performance Hondas are famed for, is the variable valve timing and lift electronic control, or VTEC, as we know it. And this is what defines many performance Hondas. It solves the age-old problem between low-end torque and high-end power. And the heart of the VTEC system is a unique camshaft and rocker arm system, and for each cylinder, 2 intake exhaust valves. There's 3 rocker arms and 3 corresponding lobes on the camshaft, and the 2 outboard lobes each have a profile for low to mid RPM, and the third, or center cam, has a dramatically different profile for longer duration and higher lift. And this is the lobe that's designed to optimize breathing and horsepower production at high engine speeds. You can hear that when you open it up. That's the VTEC kicked in yaw. At low engine RPM, the valves are operated by the outboard lobes, and during high speed operation above 5,800, the VTEC computer sends a signal to a spool valve That delivers engine oil to small pistons in the rocker arms. The oil pressure causes the pistons to slide, locking all 3 rocker arms together, and once locked, those rocker arms are forced to follow the centre cam lobe, increasing top-end performance. The crossover from low lift to high lift occurs in just 0.1 of a second, and it's virtually indetectable to the driver. The NSX didn't just get the VTEC system, it also had a variable volume induction system, and that uses separate intake air plenums located between the main intake manifold. The second plenum separated from the primary manifold by 6 butterfly valves, and they open between 4,600 and 4,900 RPM and are activated by manifold vacuum. And when those valves open, the added volume of the secondary plenum creates a higher resonant frequency, which in turn creates a sonic pressure wave. And that pressure wave hits a pair of intake valves just as they open, promoting more rapid and complete cylinder filling. It's all very clever. And this system was designed to work in concert with VTEC to improve both low-end torque and high-end RPM power. Talk to me about how it feels on the road, Johnny, mate, because from the passenger seat, it's quiet, it's refined, it rides incredibly well for a supercar. But this was the whole point of the NSX project, wasn't it? The fact that you had this sophisticated suspension, this light aluminium construction, and it would just ride over the bumps, because light cars do, don't they? Light cars just float. And it's a usable supercar. It's a supercar you can take out every single day, have fun with, impress your mates, be flashy, drive fast, but ultimately, you can use it. It's like a Japanese 911, isn't it?
It's not daunting, because you can just get into it, and it is what it is.
Because that's the thing,
it's just so easy to drive.
Because some supercars, you do get in, like, I'd say Diablo is a great example, Countach is a great example, even Testarossa, because they're quite wide, aren't they? You get in them and you're very aware that you're driving something special and expensive, and you almost adjust your driving style to suit. But already I can tell from here that you're not having to do that. You're just driving the car.
It's dead easy.
Like any other Honda.
You need to have a go. We are going to have to swap.
Believe me, we're going to swap over.
Oh, right.
Believe me. Because I've only ever driven 2 of these. One was a high mileage manual and it was a bit leggy and it had a hard life, but it was still glorious. And the other one was an F-matic, automatic. And I'll be honest, it was lovely, don't get me wrong. What a wafter, but just not necessarily how you want to enjoy this car. I think if you can afford one of these, you'd want to try and go for a manual, wouldn't you? Just the purity of the experience.
Well, I think this is a halo car, early UK manual car. And you know when people would want Jap spec cars because of less rust, especially like, 22Bs,
yeah,
things like that. A lot of people would rather have a Jap spec car than a UK car.
I generally prefer a JDM car because not just the rust, but you get a better spec normally, don't you? The Jap cars tend to be better spec than the British cars. Although it's not a huge difference with the NSX until you get something like the Type R. It's interesting actually because this road now you can feel how light the car is because it is picking up the bumps a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a really bumpy road, this.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's not the car not doing a wonderful job, and you would imagine perhaps in any other contemporary supercar we would be losing fillings at this point.
It doesn't feel, I don't know, it's so weird. It's so composed, and this is not disrespectful. It doesn't feel that you're driving something of the value that it is. Because sometimes with like older sports cars or supercars, you're like, shit. It's you know that you're driving them. Like when you drive the 328, which we did at Sasu, gorgeous car, the GTB. But you're driving it, don't you?
Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because the Porsche 911 is always held up as the benchmark for the practical, everyday, usable supercar. I think this is even more usable than a 911. This is genuinely a car you could use every day. Gordan Murray drove his every single day.
You can see why, though.
Yeah. Nice downshift there, mate. Lovely.
I'd love to drive one of these on circuit.
I would, because I bet actually the lack of power there, it's like cars like the GT86, isn't it? And the Subaru BRZ. Not massively powerful, but the balance and the poise and the fact you can just hammer them all day actually makes them very quick on the circuit. Because I think this would be the same thing. I'm sure cars without accelerated, the fact you can carry so much corner speed with this, that's where its abilities lie, isn't it, really? It sounds absolutely fantastic. Even if we're not in the VTEC zone, it still sounds so good.
What do you reckon then?
Well, I read a few contemporary road reports on this car, and everyone was saying, compared to other supercars, and I've not driven that many supercars from the late 80s, early 90s. I've driven most of the contemporaries, and it just feels lighter, it feels easier to throw about. It feels more car-like. I think if you're trying to take someone who's never driven a supercar before and put them into one, this is almost your gateway drug, isn't it? This is the one that gets you going.
So if you think this is 91,
It's so ahead of its time.
We drove the 89 G Series, the 930 Turbo.
This feels like it's 10 years ahead.
Yes,
Easily.
Easily.
I mean, this feels like a car, in terms of its dynamics and the way it rides and sits and everything, this feels like a modern car. This does not feel 32 years old. This feels 2 years old. The only thing that's giving it away is the dashboard design and slightly the driving position.
Do you know, I really like, when you look back at the old Hondas and the Rovers, they were very simplistic, but you look at a modern dash now and like try and find, unless you've got the actual digital readout of the speedo in front of you in big numbers, you struggle to see it. It just gets lost within the dash with everything that's there. But it's a very driver focused dashboard, isn't it?
It's just lovely. The controls are featherlight, aren't they? And the steering wheel has got just enough power assistance. So it's a little bit heavy at low speeds, but as soon as you get moving, so much feedback.
Traction control button there.
Yeah, it's just minimal. It's just everything you need, nothing you don't. I think I would rather have this than a 911.
I would.
I really would rather have this than a 911. What's mad though, this is probably at least another, well, of a normally aspirated 911 of the same age, this is probably another 60 grand more.
What do you reckon to the handling then?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. But again, really subtle. We haven't really pushed this car, but you can just tell it's very neutral. It's very much, point the front, the back follows.
Seats are really comfy, aren't they?
Everything about this car I like immensely.
Just everything where you can rest your arms as a passenger, everything is perfect height. Well, for me anyway. With it being a Honda, and as we briefly discussed about, you blip that, it's good, isn't it?
You're going to blip it on the downshift.
It's good.
We still haven't quite got to VTEC zone though, because
we're respectful.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If people watching this video think, well, I wonder if I'll ever lend Johnny and Paul my car, the answer is you should, because we treat it better than our own. We don't ever have sales cars.
No, we're mechanically sympathetic.
We are. But talking of which, servicing costs are inexpensive, aren't they?
Really cheap, actually. You can get your traditional 6,000. You know, like everyone used to do 6,000 or 6 month, or 12,000 or 12 month, whichever came first, servicing. You can get a 6 month service for like as few as a few £100, £200-300 quid. Maybe a little bit more, depending where you go, but it's not out the way for a car of this value, is it?
Not really.
If you went in and they said major service plus belts and it was a couple of grand, you'd go, yeah, that's fine. Because in terms of, in correlation to the value of the car, it's neither here nor there, is it?
I think the big service on these is the 70k, isn't it? I think that's quite a scary one. Like you said, that's maybe the...
It's all right, we've got 59,000 miles to go before then.
Yeah. But that's about, I think, 3 grand the thick end of. But on that, you change everything.
Look at it in terms of ratio. So if you had a £3,000 car and you had a service and it cost you 300 quid, that's not bad. So if this is worth, argument's sake, say £150,000, if it was 15 grand, yes, that would be a lot of money. But it's
true.
You know, that would be 10%. But at £2,000-3,000 for a major service on a vehicle of this value, that's nothing.
It's a good way to look at it.
It's negligible.
Well, I've really enjoyed my day with the Honda NSX. We hope you guys have enjoyed watching Johnny and I enjoying it. So and subscribe, hit that bell. Of course, if you want to look this fashionable, do go to befaster.com. And if you have a specialist or collectible car that you'd like an insurance quote for, or you just want to find out the value of the cars you're looking at, do go and visit our friends at Hagerty UK. And we'll see you next time for more Meet Your Heroes with the 2 least heroic people on YouTube. Thanks.